Back into the studio, talking about cardio again in a different kind of way, specifically talking about cardio as it relates to fat loss. Said it on the show before, gonna say it again. It seems cardio always gets reduced to, well, how much fat is it gonna make me lose, right? Or how lean can I get doing it versus the health benefits and the fitness recovery benefits that come along with it. But we're not necessarily talking about that today. We're gonna talk specifically about fat loss and how to do your cardio. And I'm going to say it right up front, and then we're going to walk people through this and maybe try to have this conversation for the last time so that they kind of get it when they hear it. I'm going to say it right up front that doing your cardio fasted in terms of losing weight, losing body fat is not superior to doing fed state cardio. So fasted cardio, that's putting nothing in your system as opposed to going in fed to do your cardio as a means to burn body fat is not superior.
Copy.
So let's back it up. Let's walk it back. I've been saying this for years. It's a conversation that comes up all the time, particularly in the figure fitness, physique, let's say figure physique communities. It really, I think it got popularized by bodybuilding back in the day because of the culture that exists there. And then there's some other things that we can talk about. So, but for those people that aren't familiar with what we're talking about with regard to fasted cardio, we're talking about when people are looking to lose body fat and reach a particular, let's say, body composition, very lean levels of body fat. In preparation for like a show or anything, I just want to look better naked or look better in my swimsuit or my bathing suit for the vacation. They will generally get out of bed first thing in the morning and then perform a cardio workout, let's say 30 to 45 minutes to up to an hour on an empty stomach. With the thought process and the premise being, when I do that, I don't have carbohydrate or onboard sugar, let's just say within my bloodstream to use as fuel, so that, and as a result, my body would need to use body fat or fat, let's say, for its fuel source to do that. And that's not wrong. That actually isn't wrong. But what they're doing is not necessarily giving them the result that they think they're getting, and we're gonna talk through that. But that is really what fasted cardio is. Get up out of bed, or let's just say you're unfed going into it for up to 6 to 8 hours before, and you walk onto your treadmill, you get onto your stationary bike, your walk, or whatever else, and you do your cardio without any food in your guts, basically. So I mean that's the history. How did this come about? So I think the question is like, okay, where did this come? We talked about the bodybuilding community. So let's talk about cardio and the bodybuilding community and kind of where it fits into
and how it got perpetuated over time.
Let's talk about the show prep. I mean,
so show prep, a lot of these guys are giving straight out the gate an hour's worth of cardio, fasted cardio, right? Where we're just increasing calories to get into a more caloric deficit, right?
We're increasing caloric burn.
To efficiently, I'm burning more calories in this now diet, right? Because they're dieting, they're slowly pulling down and they're increasing this burn so they can lose weight, right? We adapt to it very quickly, but this is where this all came from is, I don't have any energy or any carbohydrate in my system like you just talked about, and we're going to burn more body fat, which we've come to find out is not true, right? We've actually found that your body will compensate by slowing down fat oxidation. And with the latter, the fed cardio does the opposite. It increases fat oxidation, but does not burn maybe the same amount of fat in that exercise time.
Yeah, you might have just blown people's minds there, right? So, but I think like people can wrap their head around this. If I'm a bodybuilder or a figure competitor, let's just say physique or figure competitor, and I have to get on stage in my bathing suit, and my goal is to be as lean, as shredded, as sliced and diced as I possibly can be, then I want to do everything I possibly can to gain an edge in that fat loss piece. And so I'm going into my show, depending on how I handle my nutrition, my PEDs, my drugs, maybe, and my training schedule, that's going to dictate how much I do and when I do it and all these things. And so the more experienced bodybuilder knows exactly what they need to do and how they need to do it, and has had success doing fasted cardio, regardless of the science behind it. And so they're continuing to do it. So it has been perpetuated. But let's think about it this way. So if I'm a bodybuilder and I'm prepping for a show, there's so much time that goes into every single day. The hours of the day are very limited. We know that, right? And most bodybuilders are not getting paid to be bodybuilders, right? This is very
a hobby.
Yeah, it's a hobby. It's an amateur sport, hobby, and it's expensive. It's lonely, and it requires a ton of time and dedication. And so
the top guy makes 1.4 mil, the Olympia.
Yeah, and that's through endorsements, right?
You know what I mean? But like that's
not that much money in the grand scheme of things.
And what you're doing to your body over time and trying to get to that spot, right?
Yeah, it's with all the things you got to deal with. So that's a good point, but I think for the amateur competitor, they have a job, right? They have a life. They maybe they have relationships. They have kids. They have responsibilities and liabilities. So
they won't soon if they keep going.
Going back to it being a very lonely, sport or competitive space.
It is selfish. I mean, but you have to be.
Because of the time that it takes and the dedication that it has and how it's so far outside the normal culture that we live in. And that's culture of recreation, that's culture of food, entertainment, and all those things. There's so many things revolve around food, alcohol, that kind of stuff. So they get up in the morning, they have a job, they're going to work a 9 to 5. So they get up in the morning. At some point, if you work a 9 to 5 and you've got to, let's say, be very, very strict with the amount of calories you're putting in your system, let's say for arbitrary sake, let's just say your daily goal is 3,000 calories. Well, I have to have, I got to have at least 2/3 of that on board with me to take with me during the day, right? So the meal prep time, for anybody that's done that knows how extraordinarily time consuming that is. So you have to have that part. So that part has to be taken care of. You got to pack it all up. You got to get all your shit together. You got to have your pre-workout drinks ready to go. You got to get your post-workout drinks ready to go because you're probably going from work to the gym, right? You got to pack up your clothes. You got to be ready to go. You have to have gotten sleep to recover and realize the benefits of all the working out and the nutrition and the training and the PEDs and whatever else that you're doing. So at the end of the day, or you get to workout time, right? And here we are now, we're working out. That's 2 to 3 hours. Generally speaking, by the time you walk into the door and walk out the door, depends on what day it is, what your training split looks like. Exactly. Then you have to get food back in the system because you still have to meet that 3,000 calorie need. It's a job.
You got to get to bed at some point.
And then you have to get to bed and you have to do the whole thing all over again the next day. It doesn't leave a lot of time in between to be social, to go hang out, to have relationships, and by the way, when we're starting to work into this type of work intensity or the intensity of training for a show, and also the caloric deficit that we're ultimately working ourselves into, doesn't leave a lot of energy left over. And it can impact your hormonal levels, right? So, again, we're talking about relationships. Sex drive tends to go down during this time or at some point, despite the drugs, that you may or may not be using. And I keep bringing that up because it's a very real part of this whole process. And it's a part of this conversation. So when the hell am I going to have time to get an hour of cardio in when my day is scheduled minute to minute? And where do I fit that in during the day? And so the early AM cardio becomes a thing. It's like, well, I could get up an hour early and I can get my cardio done. That is my additional calorie burning to elicit body fat reduction. I can get that done early in the morning. And so it just kind of makes sense to put it there. You don't have to worry about it. I'm not going to be exhausted at the end of my workout trying to put it in then. And then enters, so that's kind of how this early AM fasted cardio thing comes up in the first place. But the other part about it is like it takes the type of cardio we're talking about here is specific. So I think we want to break this down.
It's not performance, right? Yeah.
Zero to do with performance. I mean,
there's one foot in front of the other for a couple of 20
doesn't take a whole lot to get it done, right?
It's what's people refer to it as like LISS, low intensity steady state cardio, or steady state cardio. You could hear it. It's referred to a few different ways, but effectively it takes no skill, right? It takes very little thought process. It's mind-numbing type of stuff. You can zone out
and just...
Totally. Yeah. And that's not to say that that's what you should be doing, but you can do that. You could literally, if you had a treadmill or a stationary bike or elliptical trainer, whatever you're your choice of misery is there, right? And you had it in your bedroom. You could literally roll out of bed, jump onto the treadmill, and be half asleep and do this, and it increases the total calories burned for the day.
Yep.
So I'm going to pause for a second. So that's sort of what the life of a bodybuilder may look like, or the life of a physique or a fitness competitor might look like as they're getting into closer to their show. Anybody that's done this can relate to this. I dabbled a little bit a couple of times, and I realized how dumb that was for me. Yeah. Not it's dumb if you're doing that, but how dumb it was for me, and it just didn't fit my lifestyle. And I realized all the things I was going to have to do that I didn't want to do, from a drugs perspective, to be competitive at my size and at the time what the culture and the sport looked like. It was much different than it is now. So that I'm only speaking from my own experience. It was miserable, right? And there's points of that. I just didn't enjoy it very much. So that's kind of the bodybuilding.
And the second one you see is like they do it after, right? They're on the stair mill or whatever you want, like whatever their choice is after the workout. Yeah.
So that's another way of adding in this list, but that means your gym time spent is
so
like
much longer. One piece, right?
It's not broken.
I want to bring it back to the caloric burn piece though, because if my goal is body fat loss, or for those people listening that I don't give a fuck about the physique thing or I do. Ultimately, I want to look better naked, but that's not my goal. Why is this a thing? Well, if your goal is weight loss, and specifically doing that through fat loss, then caloric burn, or the total calories burned during the day versus your intake, so output versus input, should be the only thing you're concerned with on a daily basis.
The equation, right?
The equation. Yep. Calories, again, you need to be in a caloric deficit in order to do this.
Regardless of what you're doing.
In order to lose, body fat.
And it's not a massive caloric deficit. That's going back to like the list. It's not that I'm burning an extra 1,000 calories a day. I'm just upping my heart rate a little bit above where it would be, or my threshold is there throughout the day when I wouldn't be doing exercise. You could almost equate it to non-exercise caloric burn. So your NEAT, right? Exactly. Activity, right? So your non-exercise activity,
grocery
thermogenesis.
Shopping, walking around, cleaning.
Because it's not really exercise for the athlete. So you could put it there. Technically, if you're getting on a treadmill, you could call it exercise or whatever. But if you're just walking, or if you're just spinning your legs a little bit on an exercise bike, like on a stationary bike, I don't know if that's really. You can call it what you want. After it, whatever part of the equation. We talked about fat loss, or we talked about the fat loss equation here a little bit with Steven the other day, and we're talking about your exercise activity. We're talking about non-exercise activity, and we're talking about like thermogenesis and your BMR, right? So I don't care where you put it in the equation. The walking or the cycling fits in. It's additional calories burned, and what we're trying to do is just tip the scale enough so that we can keep the meter moving in the I'm losing body fat, but I am maintaining or maybe even still building muscle mass during this time.
Absolutely.
So macros get adjusted, and activity or intensity of activity, volume, that starts to get adjusted. But again, the bodybuilding world is different animals, different game. Yeah. My point about the cardio is it is not anything that requires a whole lot of thinking or athletic ability. And it's certainly not long distance or there's really no intensity added to it. There may be some towards the end. Maybe you're doing some intervals. If you're doing intervals at the end, I would say
talking about still for bodybuilding?
For bodybuilding, I would say if you're hitting intervals at the end, that means you're probably behind the curve. Like you're behind the power band, and you're really looking for a little bit of an extra edge because you missed your timing.
Yeah, for sure.
You're a little bit behind in terms of, I'm going to come in a little fatter than I should be.
Which actually, I've seen some guys do that just in general without doing the long steady state. They'll start adding in HIIT in 5, 10, 15, 20 minutes over time and have a way better result because they build muscle, they maintain it a little bit.
And they have to spend way less time doing it.
It's quick. It's
but it also
more efficient.
But think about this: if you're doing this already in a caloric deficit or near it, and you're pushing the envelope on how many minutes and hours you have during the day, that's hard to do, right? And you may not have the energy for it. So going back to doing the cardio at the end of the workout,
you're already there, right?
That might mean you're going, 4 hours with no food coming into the system. For sure. And then, so what you end up probably having to do is chase calories. You're late into the night, and it cuts into are all my meals prepped for the next day? Is my laundry done? Is my workout shit still in my gym bag? Or
how are you going to sleep then if you're going to be onboarding calories that late in the day?
Another thing. So that's kind of where the early AM fasted cardio sort of started, I think, in the culture. So let's time out on that.
Yeah.
What that has done now is it's transferred over into general mainstream. Like if I want to lose body fat, then fasted cardio is the answer for me. So we're going to put this out there, right? I'm going to say it again. Fasted cardio against fed cardio, when calories and exercise are equated, whether you're in that bodybuilding, well, let's just say if you're more athletic, and this is where the studies are showing us, and there are some very marked studies. They're not hard to find. Yeah. Just get on the internet, look for fasted against fed cardio for fat loss. There's several of them out there.
Schoenfeld has one.
Brad Schoenfeld is one of the probably the premier guys sort of in this industry. As far as I'm concerned, he's been published many times, and he's got some buddies out there that do a really good job as well with that stuff. Basically, what these studies are showing us is that, yes, you may be burning more body fat, or excuse me, let me stop right there. I just messed it up. You may be burning more fat for fuel during fasted cardio as compared to fed cardio, but you are not going to lose more body fat over time against the person that did fed cardio versus fasted cardio.
Yep.
When calories and exercise are equated. So I know I messed that up at the beginning, but the bottom line is neither is superior to the other. And there's some things that I think people should know, kind of, even if you're in layman's terms, to make this make sense. Why does that matter? Well, here's why it matters. Because you have to get out of your head that if I'm burning body fat, or if I'm burning fat, as a fuel source during exercise or throughout the day, does not mean I'm burning body fat.
Absolutely.
I'm burning calories, and I'm burning those calories in the form of fat.
Instead of carbohydrate.
Or instead of protein. Ultimately, it's going to
And these things are bouncing back and forth. It's not like, like everyone wants to be like, I'm either keto or this. Like, dude, they're going back and forth depending on the anaerobic and aerobic cellular oxygen, right? Like, do I have enough oxygen in the cells? They transfer, right? So it's constantly going back and forth.
There are a lot of variables that go into this. What's the intensity? How fed or how much stored fuel do I have on board from my, from previous meals, right? How much rest did I get the night before? When we talk about insulin sensitivity, that's kind of where that conversation came up with Steven the other day. We were talking about sleep and insulin sensitivity. So again, just because you're using fat for fuel doesn't mean you're burning body fat, right? The body doesn't work like that. We've said this before. If you ate donuts last night at 2 a.m. after the bar closed down, after, down in however many drinks or beers, my brother's in the studio today. He's fist pumping right out. It's one of his favorite pastimes.
Glazed or maple? Fuck yeah.
Maple bars all day. Maple bars with the bacon sprinkled on the top.
Oh my God, they're the best.
Gross.
Dude, the bacon bars.
If you're doing that at 2 a.m. and on the treadmill at 6 a.m., right?
What? You're not tasting those calories?
Yeah, the guilt is just set in, right? And you're just like, oh, fuck, I've got to get to the gym, right? And you've got your wearable strapped on. You're looking at the little graph on the treadmill that says, this is my fat burning zone. And you're watching your heart rate, and, your Apple thing is telling you one thing.
You're Googling how much a maple bar is.
You got your Whoop
calories.
on the other hand. It's telling you your recovery levels at zero and all this stuff. You are not burning the maple bars and the alcohol on the treadmill the next morning. You're not doing that. And it never ceases to amaze me how many of those conversations now I have a year with people still that don't get that. They're watching their watch and thinking about dinner or the party that they were at over the weekend or whatever, and they're trying to negate this. The body doesn't work like that.
Obviously, we want to burn calories in exercise, but if you look at a standard resistance training exercise, it burns less than cardiovascular exercise, right, in calories. But it does not burn more body fat, right? Over time, we build muscle mass. We have EPOC, right? We're burning calories for
an extended period of time
after the exercise, right? Whereas cardio, it stops. Right, where we burn calories, it stops. Where in a resisted training profile, we continually are burning calories over time. And we're also hopefully building muscle to increase our daily burn, just sitting, right? Yeah. Just sitting. So we don't have to do all of this extra work, right? The cardio should really come in when I need a little bit of tweak, right? I'm trying to lose a little bit of extra body fat. When we're specifically talking about body fat, to be honest with you, when I look at cardio, it's purely for cardiovascular health and training the heart. So you start looking at your
totally
zones
different game.
and programming and all that stuff. For me, like we talked about, I can ramp that up when I need to for fat loss, but everything I do for fat loss is maintained from the calories.
From the nutrition, the ins and the
bottom
outs.
line. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's a really solid point. So I want to make another point, and that is we are not saying that you cannot lose body fat by doing fasted cardio.
No, I prefer doing my cardio in the morning because it gets me ready for the day. It's just, how is your day set up?
So there's some considerations. We'll talk about those. So the last thing I want to say about this is, let's just going back to the science. Here's something that's very interesting. Okay, so when you do fasted cardio, and this is what the sort of the study has shown us, when you do fasted cardio against fed cardio, and again, this is when calories and exercise are equated, diet's equated, in the most controlled study in some of the most controlled studies that we know you can actually do. So, and there have been some done specifically on, or one that I'm aware of on bodybuilders, but specifically.
Was it the women?
It was women. It was female bodybuilders. Yeah. So, but going back, so if I'm not saying you cannot lose body fat doing fasted cardio, but when you do your fasted cardio, and when you do your fasted cardio, yes, you probably will burn more fat for fuel during that time. But what's going to happen is that just means you burn less fat for fuel later in the day. Your body will switch to more of a carbohydrate-rich fuel system in order to get you through the day. And conversely, if I go into my cardio fed, I'll probably be burning more carbohydrate as my fuel source. But conversely, later in the day, I will use more fat for fuel for the rest of my activity. Again, when calories and exercise are equated. So basically what we're talking about here is it's 6 in one and half dozen in the other. You choose whatever the fuck you want to do. I've said it 100 times. It's America. Do whatever you want.
Because it's not superior.
But it is not. It just doesn't. It doesn't.
The caloric deficit is the biggest thing here.
It's not. Again, fasted cardio is not king to fed cardio, and so that's the takeaway. There are some considerations though. All right, so let's talk about some considerations. So you were talking very specific about what is your goal.
Yeah.
If my goal is to increase my cardiovascular health, then for me, I want to make sure there's a bit of a performance piece there. And I don't just get on there and simply try to elevate my heart rate a little bit to increase my total caloric burn. That's going to be a byproduct of the training program that I'm on, and I'm going to make sure that I'm balancing the calories against that and the types of calories against that in order to fuel me through that. So for an example, if I'm a runner, right, and I'm trying to be a better runner, or I'm trying to increase my distance, I'm trying to increase my time, I'm trying to increase my power output, fasted cardio
it's gonna suck.
Likely isn't the best way to do it. I'm not saying you can't. There's a consideration there. We can talk about this.
Absolutely.
But if you're going out and you're looking for performance gains where you're going to be dipping, you mentioned moving through the fuel systems, that low intensity, steady state cardio is more likely to get into a fat burning system again if you're fasted. But if you're going deep into the pain cave, right? And you're doing sprints, hills, whatever, or you're working through different intensities, or you're going for longer than an hour with an elevated heart rate, again, above that basic threshold, you're probably going to want more calories on board from a performance.
Because this is where I was talking about the switch, right? Where we might be on a bike and it's mostly aerobic. All of a sudden we go uphill, or we've tapped in, right? We start switching into our anaerobic, right? Which is running off a completely different fuel source. So it's very important to look at, like, the body's not just burning this one primary fuel source, and kind of understand that and just be like, okay, once that's out of my head, am I in a caloric deficit? And like, where am I at tracking wise? So
that's, again, going back
for fat loss.
But going back to performance, different game, different goal.
Yeah.
Right. Again, fat loss may be a byproduct of your performance goal. But if your goal is performance, fat loss shouldn't be the focus.
Exactly.
Yeah, we want to see the needle move in the performance direction, not
This goes back to our triangle of awareness, and what is it that I'm trying to obtain here? Is it a performance goal? Is it an aesthetic goal, or is it a longevity goal? And while all of those things may benefit one another, if my goal is performance, fat loss should not be my focus.
Exactly.
It might be a byproduct, but at some level, it also might be detrimental to my performance. So that things to keep in mind. So that is a consideration. That's one consideration. The other consideration would be like, hey, if you feel nauseous because you've put food in your stomach, right? And some people are just really sensitive to this. And sometimes it may have to do with what they're putting in, but they can be really sensitive to this, like going into the gym, or getting onto whatever, if it's at home, getting into some type of exercise, low intensity, even steady state cardio with food in the gut may upset, the gut, and may make you feel nauseous, or may make you feel pukey, or just, gassy, or whatever the case is, in which case,
skip it. Yeah.
Maybe faster cardio is the better thing for you. That might work. However, I could tell you, like, for me, if I was going, again, aside from a very short period of my life, cardio was always more about the health benefits or the performance benefits of it. So I would always go in fed. So if you're going to go in fed, what are maybe some suggestions for people that are like, okay, well, cool. I still do my cardio early in the morning, but maybe I don't want to do it fast anymore. Maybe because I'm going to try doing it fed this time. What are some of the things that we could put in the system? What are some things we maybe want to stay away from in the system?
Well, I guess always they're talking about a higher fat diet before is not good, right? Because it takes so long to
digest and process.
But if you are on a ketosis diet, right, a ketogenic diet, some people might use ketones or whatever before. But I mean, if you're doing this fed, your body should be digested by the time you get there, regardless of what you had. So depending on the individual, if, your body might break down fat a little faster, or you don't feel that sluggish, that pre-workout meal is going to be different for everybody, right? So you need to tinker with that a little bit.
It's probably going to be, very low fat.
Low fat.
It's going to be
medium protein, high carb.
It's probably going to be either a little
ratio.
I think that's a really good way of looking at it. Like maybe a 2-to-1 protein to even 3-to-1 ratio carbohydrate to protein. And that may, again, that's going to vary for people depending on what they're going to do. But something that's light, maybe even more liquid in nature, so it's easier to digest.
Gastric emptying is faster.
The bottom line is, if you're giving yourself a bolus of protein and carbohydrate, you don't want your body to have to be working on that very deeply in order to make it comfortable,
energy usable,
and into the system, so that it doesn't upset the GI tract and your performance for whatever it is that you're trying to do. So, for some people, again, diet types set aside, for some people that could be oatmeal, and for other people, it might be cream of rice. It might be fruit, right? It might be it might be a liquid drink. It might be like a carbohydrate mixture or powder with some protein powder, or it could be like a carbohydrate, some type of like honey in like a yogurt or something, and you're figuring out honey and fruit on yogurt, or
if you want the
granola
dairy,
or things like that.
Dairy,
that's going to be very individual and very specific based on how you prefer to eat, how your body reacts to certain things. But the bottom line is, I love where you came with that, Jeff, and it's like probably a 2-to-1 to 3-to-1 ratio. Prior to, and if you're going longer than an hour, you're going into the hour and a half, maybe even 2-hour range, then I would stick to probably closer to the 3-to-1 ratio. For most people. I actually can handle a 2-to-1 pretty well. But the 3-to-1 ratio is a little bit more carbohydrate to protein for the longer duration, So those are other considerations for people to have. The other one, you mentioned the ketogenic diet and using like exogenous ketones as a way to do this.
Because I know that's a big fad right now with the long distance and ultra marathon guys, right?
That is the fat adapted, state. And getting people to be more fat adapted. Okay.
And I have seen people be very efficient in it, and
there's some science that's coming out now that's starting to look at, there way more I think needs to happen, but to the higher intensity type exercise specific to the keto style, or more, maybe even more carnivore type diet, where we're heavier on the fat and the protein with very little to no carbohydrate. Let's just say very, very low carb. I think a lot more needs to come out on this, but by the same token, like if I'm going into my cardio routine and I've adopted one of these types of diet styles or eating styles, you're going to want to be aware of, like, okay, if I'm going to eat before, I mean, how are you going to consume that protein? And in what form might it come in? Maybe it's in a powder form. Something's pre-digested, something that's easily digested. You don't want a gut full of ribeye, right? Yeah. Where you've got, a heavy fat, heavy protein bolus that's sitting in there, your body has to digest or whatever. That may seem like common sense, but I see people kind of going to these extremes, and these diet styles are going all in on them, and they don't know how to adjust appropriately. So, maybe that's the point where you're supplementing a little bit if you're trying to get your cardio in early in the morning or whatever, and you're trying to do it fed, but right out of bed, so to speak. Hard. Yeah, it can be tough. It's challenging. It can be tough. Any other considerations that you guys can think of with regard to what you may want to know if you're going to do fasted or fed cardio?
So if you're going to do fasted cardio, in my opinion, or fasted any exercise, right, we're looking about 30 to 50% of our carbohydrate intake later in the day, right? So we have access to those reserves early in the morning, right? So for me, I train fasted depending on the day, right? Like if I can get in the morning, I love it. It feels better for me. I'm able to get in. I don't like food in my stomach digesting. It doesn't feel good. So later in the day, I can just eat all day and not have to worry about, is this digested? Is this time?
So you're kind of chasing calories
exactly. At that point. Yep. Yeah. Then I like it that way. So it works out for me. Completely lost my spot there. But like early in the morning, you want to have 30 to 50% of your carbohydrate at nighttime. So you have those stores, right? Because if you're coming in depleted at nighttime, you're waking up and you're going to go try to train fasted, you're going to be in a deeper.
Yeah, I think there's a little bit of like individuality there and how people manage that. But I get what you're saying. Like you're loading in the carbohydrate either right after you've worked out or as you're moving into your workout, which generally happens later in the day for a lot of people. You're sort of planning it out, so you're pushing it late. You're pushing it later, unless you're working out first thing in the morning. Then it almost by default you're kind of chasing them throughout the course of the day. If you're trying to get in 200 to 300 grams of carbohydrate, you don't want to do that in 2 meals. If you've got 8 hours left in the day, let's space it out. Yeah, let's space it out.
And that's just the way that I've found for me that works the best.
Yeah, gotcha. Gotcha. I think the last consideration I would bring in here is like, okay, but what about the bodybuilders that get super lean and they're all doing the early morning fasted cardio? Okay, so if I didn't already make this clear before, and I'm not saying it's everybody, but it's a lot. They're using some type of performance enhancing drugs.
They're obsessed. They're on PEDs. They're tracking. They're doing these guys are doing everything.
It's a science.
That's why they're shredded.
And by the way, more power to them. I think it's great.
That's why they look like that.
I think it's great. Let the athletes set the standard.
Dude.
I think it's great. Yeah. If that's the way the
these
sport is.
These guys are doing everything.
And that's the way the sport is. And there's a lot of other sports that do things very similar. But let's be specific about why they may be more efficient at burning body fat
during that time.
And losing body fat during that time, because they are taking exogenous hormones. They are taking this would include human growth hormone. This would include testosterone, right? This would include the derivatives of those things. 100%. The one thing we didn't talk about that should be talked about is insulin. These guys are using insulin, right? So those are all things that are going to make you more efficient, number one, at burning calories, right? Because it's going to impact your metabolism. Number two, it's going to make you more efficient at using those calories to build muscle and fuel the other systems like fat, and utilize fat for fuel. And carbohydrate for fuel.
That's the biggest thing is utilization, right?
1,000%.
Put it in there. If the body's not utilizing it, doesn't.
They're going to use things to help them sleep and get into a deeper level of sleep in order to recover. There is a whole cocktail of things that people use, and I don't think any of it's wrong. If that's what you want to do, fucking do it. More power to you. Just understand, if you get into that sport and you want to go to the top, that 1.4 mil guy. He's fucking chock full of these things.
With a doctor.
For him. Good for him. Like, they got this shit dialed in. My point of that is like, okay, so could that person be more efficient at burning body fat with all those things in them? 1,000 fucking %. Does that mean that they would be, when we looked at that scientific experiments there where somebody's doing their cardio fasted, right? And then later in the day, they're moving over to more of a carbohydrate-rich fuel system.
Yep.
Does that mean they operate the same? I don't know. Those experiments, those tests, those studies have not been done to my knowledge, because how could you control it?
Yeah,
how many of these guys, how many of these people are you going to get to stand up, go in there and go, we're all using the same drugs.
Exactly.
We're all doing the same workout. We're all eating this,
It's going to impact each person differently.
Right.
Yeah.
So you're never going to see that. It's just never going to happen. But could they be a little bit more efficient in this fasted cardio state?
Absolutely.
Fuck yeah, they could. And they probably are. So but if that's not you, then why are we even having this conversation?
Exactly.
So I think at the end of the day, I mean, what are the takeaways? The takeaways are you do you.
Yes. When does it fit in? The cardio piece, when does it fit in? What is your goal? Fat loss, performance, all of these different things, right? There's just longevity, basic health, right? And
then how are you doing it? And then what makes you feel good? Yeah. So, but to stand up on the pulpit and go fasted cardio is better, is the way, right? It's the way versus the fed cardio. Let's put it to bed, because it isn't. Maybe it is if you're chock full of PEDs.
Yeah.
Maybe it is. I don't know. Nobody could tell you that. Maybe the results speak for themselves when you look at things across the board and, flip through Muscle and Fiction magazine or whatever the other things are. You can look at that and make your own determination.
Yeah.
But with regard to the fasted versus fed cardio, just do your cardio.
Yeah. And then be in a deficit.
Be in a deficit.
If that's what you want to do, lose weight, be in a deficit.
That's the answer at the end of the day.